And you're never in your right mind when the Lord has sent a messenger of Satan to you. What a rough story. Anyways, verse 18, David fled and escaped and went to Samuel at Ramah. So here's this woman who loves David. Life happens. As you know, chapter 19, flip through there. Chapter 20, flip forward, 21, 22, 23, 24 is more of Saul trying to kill David. Basically, you can basically say tons of bloodshed because he wants to kill David, and when he can't kill David, David's friends will do. It kills them all, an entire town of priests. And then you get to chapter number 25. David is just trying to make friends with people that he has protected, a dude named Nabal. The short story is, you can see in chapter 25 and verse number 41 and 42, 42 and 43. Are you in chapter 25, verse 42 and 43? Abigail rose in haste, and that's a story we'll get to. Rode on a donkey, attended by 5 of her maidens. 5's a good number. She followed the messengers of David and became his wife. Okay, he's away at war and he's got another woman in his life. Okay, verse 43, David also took Ahinoam of Jezreel, and so both of them were his wives. Meanwhile, back in the safety of Gilgal, Saul had given Michal, his daughter, David's wife, to Paltiel, the son of Laish, who was from Galim. Man, what a gross story. I mean, there's nothing precious little redemptive that I can see in this story. I mean, this is David not only marrying extra people and bringing extra women into his life, but this is David's own wife being trafficked by her father. Trafficked. Dirty verb, right? But isn't that what happened? Moves her around like a piece on a chessboard. As a political move, as a grudge move. And I don't think it's because Saul hears that David's remarried. Well, he's not coming home. I guess that's that. No, this is Saul seeking to hurt David and ruin his life. You know? And so here you have more of the same. And then, as you know, Saul dies. And Saul, in chapter 30, flip forward to chapter 31, Saul not only dies, but Saul's son Jonathan and the other sons die. So, if you could just do the math with me for a minute, you can see in the last verse of chapter 31 of 1 Samuel that Saul and all but one of his sons died that day. So if we could say it this way, Michal has lost her father and her brothers, at least most of her brothers, in a battle at the end of 1 Samuel. And then we flip to 2 Samuel. I realize we're making you move your hands, but we're just going in one direction here. And you get to 2 Samuel chapter number 3, and you find this record. 2 Samuel chapter 3, David is now king over part of Israel in a town called Hebron. And there's 2 things that happen in chapter number 3 of 2 Samuel. Well, 3 things. Let me list them for you. Saul's remaining son is whacked, Ishbosheth. David's wife Michal is returned to him. 2 Samuel chapter number 3. And for the life of me, I'm having a hard time. Help me with the verse. When his wife is given back to him. Thank you very much. Verse 14. So David sent messengers to Ishbosheth, Saul's son, saying, give me my wife, Michal. And you can see in verse 15, Ishbosheth sent and took her from her husband. So here's this woman who was married to David, taken from her, given to another man. And then when David becomes king, she becomes his third wife when she was his first wife. And then her husband went along with her to Bahurim, weeping behind her. That leads me to believe, as it does with Pastor Jordan, we discussed this, it seems like this means that she probably loved him. Because he certainly loved her enough to be weeping. It would be really callous, I think, for us to say, well, that's just the way the world was back then. This woman has been moved all over the world, the known world as far as she's concerned. And then there's this little thing mentioned at the beginning of the chapter, 2 Samuel 3. Look at verse number 2. Sons were born to David in Hebron. His firstborn was Amnon by Ahinoam the Jezreelitess. Okay, there's one woman. His second, born to him while he was king in Hebron, Chileab, the son of Abigail, the widow of Nabal the Carmelite. Okay, that's two women. Michal's not been listed yet. The third, Absalom, the son of Maachah, the daughter of Talmai, the king of Geshur. Okay, that's three women in David's life. All of them giving him different sons. The fourth, Adonijah, the son of Haggith, another woman. The fifth, Shaphathiah, the son of Abital. That's another woman, obviously, since they're his sons. Verse 5, the sixth, Ithraim, by David's wife Eglah. These were born to David in Hebron. This is heartbreaking. Because here in a minute, in addition to these 6 women, he's going to have Michal given to him. I'm not sure the order. Was she given to him like between these sons? Here's what we know to be sure. Michal is now one of David's 7 wives by the end of the chapter. And then, if that's not bad enough, you get to chapter 5. And you find out in verse number 13, 2 Samuel 5 and verse 13, David took more concubines and wives from Jerusalem after he had come from Hebron. In the first verses of this chapter, David wins Jerusalem. So he has 7 women in his life, and then he comes to Jerusalem and he adds at least 2 concubines, because concubine in verse 13 of chapter 5 is plural. And he adds at least 2 wives, and I say that because wives is also plural. So now he has at least 11 women in his life that serve him as a wife would. Whatever that means to a man who has 11 of them. So by the time you get to the end of the chapter and you get into chapter number 6, David gathered all the choice men of Israel, verse number 1, and he gathered 30,000 of them. David arose and went with all the people who were with him from Baal, Judah, to bring up from there the ark of God. Here is a key story in the history of Israel. The Ark of the Covenant is now going to be in Jerusalem. For the first time, it's going to find its home in Jerusalem. It's time to move it towards Jerusalem. There was problems in the movement of it. A man put his hand on the ark in verse number 6 and died. And so verse number 10, David decided not to move the ark anymore. For verse number 11 says 3 months. Then David in verse number 12 decides it's time to try again. And this time he has learned we're not supposed to have it on a cart. We're supposed to carry it like God said. And then you get to verse 13. When those bearing the ark of the Lord had gone 6 paces, that David sacrificed oxen and fatted sheep. David danced before the Lord with all of his might, wearing a linen ephod. He's acting as a priest, which is unique to David. It's unique because God doesn't strike him for it, because probably he's a picture of his son, Jesus Christ. Verse 15, David and all the house of Israel brought up the ark of the Lord and was shouting with the sound of the trumpet. And as the ark of the Lord came into the city of David, Michal, David's wife, looked through... Whoa, hang on, that's not what it says. Michal saw his daughter look through a window and saw King David leaping. He is married to her again. And in this passage, she is identified more with her father than she is with her husband. And she was looking through a window and saw King David leaping and whirling before the Lord. And look, she despised him in her heart. I want to just face the music. In these passages that we have looked at this morning, we found out that Michal loved David so much that it is said twice. And by the end of our passage this morning, she despises him in her heart. That struck me as unfortunate. I've been thinking about this for a couple years, how this changed. And at the outset, it would be very simple to see why she hates this man now. But the problem is that she evidently misunderstands the big picture. Now, that is not something you want to tell your unhappy wife. Am I right? Babe, you just need to see the big picture. Especially after everything she's been through. And so in verse number 17, what is the big picture? They brought the ark of the Lord and set it in its place in the midst of the tabernacle that David had erected for it. And David offered offerings, peace offerings, burnt offerings, peace offerings for the Lord. And when David had finished offering burnt offerings and peace offerings, he blessed the people in the name of the Lord of hosts. And he distributed among all the... Everyone is enjoying this. Everybody is enjoying it. Except for one person who was watching from a window and despising King David in her heart. And 3 times in this passage, like in verse number 20, David returned to bless his household, of which Michal is a part, along with at least 10 other women. And Michal, the daughter of Saul, came out to meet David. Now she's ready to come out from the window. And what does she say? How glorious was the king of Israel today, uncovering himself in the eyes of the maids of his servants, as one of the base fellows, empty fellows, normal guys, one of the common folk would do. Uncovers himself. You shouldn't assume this is like he's stark nude in the streets of Jerusalem, but rather like maybe the apostle Peter and John, who is fishing, called naked, but then the text clarifies it just means his outer garment is not upon him. So David is naked in the sense that he's not wearing his regal stuff. He's down to what you might consider layer number 1, but also includes this ephod that we saw earlier in the text in verse number 14. And David says to Michal, it was before the Lord who chose me instead of your father. Oh boy. Already in this passage, she has been identified with Saul, her father, and David follows suit and says, your dad is gone today because of God. He could have almost been saying, and you're lucky you didn't follow him. I will be even more, verse 22 says, well, you might see the end of verse 21. So, therefore, I will play music before the Lord. I'm going to dance with all my might, as it says earlier in the text. And I'm going to play music before the Lord like I did before your dad. If I would play music before your father, how much more fitting that I should play music before the Lord who unseated your father. And so, verse 22, I will be even more undignified than this. Or, in today's language, he would say, hold my drink and watch. I'm going to continue to be more of what you do not like, evidently. Now, I want to be tender here, because by the end of the chapter, the writer is very careful to teach you, the reader, that Michal is the one who paid for her attitude that day. And for the 3rd time in the chapter, Michal, the daughter of Saul, not Michal, the wife of David, Michal, the daughter of Saul, had no children to the day of her death. That is a rough story. And I just want to be sensitive enough to say that I feel for Michal. On the one hand, I understand why she despises somebody that she used to love with tenderness to the point where she helps him escape. In fact, obviously it was a big deal to me because we spent the first 20 or so minutes of our time together setting the stage for this very thing. It must be that it was important. And so, I don't want to be trivial here. I don't want to say something like, well, Michal should have gotten over it. She should have gotten over being passed around by her father to David and then to this other guy and then back to David. And then by the time, maybe she should have got over it because after all, that's how the world was then. I don't want to say that because that's not how the world was designed. The world was designed that one man would be with one woman until one of them would die. And when that doesn't happen, that's not the Lord's design. I want to nuance that and I did. 2 years ago, we talked about Samson's marriage and how the Lord actually designed that thing to fail. But I think we can agree that a perfect world does not look like someone with broken marriages. We don't live in that world, but I still feel for people that wish they were in that world. Some of us fortunate ones that by God's grace have been married a long time to one person, we are blessed. It didn't have to be that way. Because on our best day, I can't control my wife. We don't have a country where I can put her under my thumb. She has choices, and I have been at the mercy of her choices, and I am still, to some degree, at the mercy of her choices. You are not second rate in here right now if you are on your second or third marriage. I'm not saying that. I am saying that just because that's the way the world was doesn't mean that we just forget about all the feelings that are involved in a less than ideal world. In fact, I think it would be also a mistake here to say something like, even though all your brothers are dead and your father is dead, at least you have a good man named David. I mean, that is tantamount to the father of Samuel saying to his barren wife, am I not better than 10 sons? And the short answer is no, you're not. No, you're not. Even if you are on paper, you're not. She wants a son. And so some dude trying to get his wife to stop hurting sometimes says dumb things. Often says dumb things. And so we aren't not going to pull Michal up to the desk here and say, hey, why don't you just get over it? That's the way the world was. Suck it up. We're also not going to say something to her as impersonal as, well, at least you have David and all of the sister wives. We could also say something that's not terribly helpful. Like Michal should have seen how good she had it. It's not like everyone gets to live in the palace. No, what I want us to do is look at the hard fact that sometimes it happens in our hearts that some people that you used to love, you no longer do. In fact, you hate them. And I want us to at least examine that reality in the text because the text is instructive to us. It's profitable for doctrine, reproof, correction, instruction, and righteousness. So we're wrapping it up here. What good would it be to talk about why this shouldn't bother us? We all know how affections wane in families and in churches. But what doesn't work is to rewrite history and say things like, well, I don't think we ever really were in love. Well, what good does that do? And what kind of a moron spends 10 grand on a wedding with someone they don't love? You're lying to yourself. You did love that person. You did dream that you would be with them the rest of your life. And I think that the reason why people don't want big marriages is because somewhere in the back of their mind, they're like, what does it even mean anymore? And then Christians are getting pretty flippant. You don't have to look far for someone who's living with someone they're not married to. We got to do better than that. We don't look at a world that says, well, it's kind of like just part of the world now. Believers say, what did God design and how can we get back to that thing? Is there a way that I can play a part in this world being a little better because there are Christians in it? And so I don't think we should say that. Or I should have left years ago. This poor woman, look what she's done to me. I should have left years ago. This man has done X, Y, and Z. Now, sometimes things change. There is a particular kind of shirt that I used to go to Joseph A. Banks to get, and we used to wait for it to go on clearance. And I love that shirt. Because of how good you are to me every October, I had some money where I didn't mind spending money on an expensive shirt. So I go to Joseph A. Banks, and I'm looking for this shirt, a particular shirt with a particular tag, and it just feels different. I'm a weirdo. I was basically legally blind until I was like 23, had LASIK surgery, so all of my other senses are incredibly sensitive. So if the fabric ain't right, it is now a rag to clean the truck with. How many of you know what I'm talking about? Right. It's got to feel right. I picked up that shirt that I bought 10 of, and it didn't feel right. I felt cheated, like they swapped it on me after I fell in love with that shirt. Same brand, same size, different materials. And that which I used to love, I now held in contempt. The tragedy of a love that used to be. It hurt Michal. However you want to look at this, I'm talking to you today because right now, some of you in this room are thinking about how this applies to you. You are thinking about somebody that you used to love. You're thinking about a company that you used to love, a church that you used to love. And can I just say that for all of the reasons that we want to give why Michal is justified in the way she feels towards David, I want you to see how her story ends in verse 23. She died without any children. I'm not interested in making you feel like you're second rate. We know infertility happens. This is not an issue of infertility, friends. This is clearly tied to what she did that day. I'm not interested in that. I will gladly, some of you are new to the idea of an authoritative text in your life. I want to be sensitive to that. And I want to meet you today and talk to you about your questions about this text. But the bottom line, and I want to say this patiently, I don't want you to feel like I'm being impatient with you. The bottom line is that these actions in this text affected her primarily, not David. So to my older friends in this church, to my older friends, you may notice that things that used to satisfy you in the Lord now turn your stomach. I want to ask you to watch your heart. You're the one that's going to die fruitless. You might have all the reasons in the world why you are feeling different about something. But this text says that if you're not careful and you don't watch your heart, you're the one who dies fruitless. To my peers, you may notice that you simply choose to not participate when people celebrate things that you used to celebrate. I don't think it would be a far-fetched thing to say Michal was one of the women who thought highly of David in chapter 18 of 1 Samuel. I don't think it would be far-fetched to say that she used to clap when the choir sang. I don't think it would be far-fetched to say that at all. Something's changed in her, and now she is at a distance. Come here a minute. Some of you build distance before you finally leave. I don't care if we're talking about a relationship or a friendship. I don't care if we're talking about a work relationship or a church relationship. I don't care if we're talking about a small group or a company you love to shop at or a restaurant that you used to love, enjoy visiting. You build distance first, and you let them kind of do their thing, and you sit back as a judge over whether they should be celebrating what you used to love. I want to ask you to watch your heart.